Well, hello everyone. I'm Chris Dew with E1, and I want to welcome you to our session today that really focuses on migrating away from Dynamics GP and how to keep your historical data if you made that decision. Now, I think there's a lot of people. Again, maybe I should start with a little history about me. I used to be a product manager for Dynamics GP. I actually used to work for um, before I worked for Microsoft, but even before that, I worked for Great Plains. And so I loved GP and I thought it was a great product and it was a fantastic fit for many people out there. But I think one of the things is that we're realizing is that you know there's a shelf life for some of these software and people are starting to think about maybe it's 10 years down the road, maybe it's 5 years down the road, maybe it's a couple of years, or maybe it's something that's on your plate for looking at migrating to another solution. And again, doesn't even have to be just in the Microsoft family, right? There some of you may be looking at some other options, like we're going to probably talk about Business Central a bit today. But I think there's a whole host of other solutions outside of even the Microsoft space that you might potentially be looking at around, well, let's say it could be NetSuite, it could be Intact, it could be Acumatica, could be some other solution um, like that. And so we realize that, again, people are considering these options and we want to go on that journey with you. We want to give you some of the tools that we've given you all along, the Smart List Builder and Extender and FlexCoder and all kinds of really cool tools that we've tried to make your GP experience as good as we can. We want to make sure that you get access to that data if you are choosing to move away from GP and maintain, again, that great relationship that you've had with the data. So that's going to be our focus today. And I'm excited to kind of go on that journey with you. I would encourage you to ask questions. Right there is a question pane in our GoToWebinar today. So I would encourage you to ask them in there, and then we'll get to as many of them as we can probably later on in the show. So let's dig right in. I have a few things I want to discuss. We're gonna have a quick agenda, and one of the first things I want to talk about is a few terms, because there's maybe some terms that you aren't overly familiar with, right? Maybe again, as you're exploring this world, or maybe some of you have already moved over or whatever. But we're going to make sure that we understand some of these terms that many people are throwing around, and I want you to understand what they are. We're going to kind of talk about an overall migration strategy that we have at E1. And again, like I said, whatever route you choose to go, we want to go on that journey with you. And then I'm going to specifically talk about 3 unique scenarios, and we'll do some demonstration during that part. And I want you to get some ideas, maybe get the wheels turning on different ways that you can approach this issue that a lot of us have as we're doing that migration. And then while we're talking about PopDoc as quite a bit of this solution, we're going to talk just briefly about where does Smart Connect fit into that whole overall picture of your migration scenario. And then I just have a couple next steps for you to go forward on. All right, so let's talk about a few terms. One that we're going to talk about today is something called the Cloud Migration Tool. So now this is kind of specifically for Business Central. So again, if you're already considering moving to NetSuite or, like I said, Intact, Acumatica, one of those types of tools, then this tool doesn't really do much for you, because this is really only something that Microsoft has done for Business Central. But basically, what is this cloud migration tool? I think that's kind of a key part to this. Is what does this do for you? And basically, it's a tool or a set of tools to kind of assist in moving GP, and it actually has some stuff for SL and things like that as well. Moving it from on-premise to business, well, to Business Central into a data lake. And again, that leads us to kind of our second term here. This other term is called Azure Data Lake. And what is a data lake? It's really just what we would call a storage account in Microsoft Azure. It's basically, it takes 30 seconds to create and allows you to store all kinds of data. So unlike a database where you have tables and views and things like that, this allows us to put files up there. So it could be a CSV file, it could be a JSON file, it could be, you know, any number of types of files. So it can be kind of unstructured, if you will. Now, what is one of the things about an Azure data lake that's really enticing? Because we're going to come back to this probably a few times. One of the things with a data lake that I think a lot of people do love is that it's very, very cost effective. And so even if we look at some of the options on there, you know, it basically says like for $20 a month, you could have up to a terabyte of data and you could access it like crazy and stuff like that. And it would cost you $20 US a month. Let me give you a little more real world scenario. We have done, oh man, we've done in the last year, we've done an incredible amount of migrations and migration testing and you know, whole databases and just a ton of scenarios. And every day we are running automated tests against it and doing demos and stuff like that. Last year, it cost me less than $5 for, you know, gigabytes upon gigabytes of data that I have up there. And it costs me less than $5 for the whole year. So I want you to understand that when we start talking about a data lake, it's a very cost-effective option for storing that data. And again, even just to give you one example, this last month we probably did almost 100 migrations of GP, like the entire, you know, solution where they had, you know, 3 companies or 4 companies or something like that. We did like 100 of them in test. It cost us 44 cents. So just so you understand, it is a great way to store data without, you know, keeping costs going. All right, another term that we're going to throw around is data gateway. And what do you need to understand about what a data gateway is? It's essentially, it's a secure web service that allows us to access the on-premise solutions without exposing that data directly to you know, the cloud tools that need to access it. So that's really what a data gateway is. All right, the next thing I said we talk about is really an overall, what is an overall migration strategy and how can E1 help you with it? And what we've kind of, I've drawn this little diagram up. One of the things in here, I guess, is we realize that people are going to have a lot of different ways of accessing that data. So today, maybe you have it in an on-premise system, right? I have it represented here. And we can, you know, basically using like the gateway, we have a way of securely accessing your on-premise system from PopDoc, which is hosted in Azure. And then I think the key to this, right, and all of these is that we now can make that visible to you in kind of a smart list, right? So many of you love smart lists as much as I do and have built a ton of stuff in smart list builder. So you have all these amazing smart lists. We're going to talk about that in just a second on how you are going to be able to access that wherever you go. But what I want to point out is that there's a whole host of other ways that you may be looking at your data. So let me just kind of cover a few of these. There are people that, and again, maybe are looking at archiving their database into, let's say, into the cloud, right? So maybe it's an Azure SQL database, or maybe it could be stored on Amazon Web Services or whatever. But they're saying, you know what? I had it on premise, but I don't want it there anymore. I don't want to maintain it, and so I'm going to put it somewhere else. So that's certainly something. Again, PopDoc can handle that scenario. There is, like I said, part of the cloud migration tool. Microsoft will move parts of your data to the cloud and the data lake, and again, PopDoc can use that. Or again, we have some great tools that will help you, you know, access that data lake if you want. And then again, even there's a few options out there. I know some of the partners, and I'll highlight one, Power GP. If you have gone to an option like that where they're hosting for you or their solution, they have an API that we have connected directly into and can again pull that data and display it wherever you go. So just want to understand that again, with between the tools of PopDoc and Smart Connect, we can assist in your overall migration strategy. And I got to be really careful here, I guess. We're really focused a lot on today. Most of it is getting access to your historical data, because there certainly are, right? Microsoft may have some tools, or maybe some of the other solutions will have some tools to bring in a lot of your master records, right? Maybe your customers and vendors and inventory items and things like that, and maybe even some beginning balances. But a lot of them are just kind of, they're skipping over the historical transactions, and that's really what we're focused on today. Okay, so just very briefly, again, data migration. Pick your solution, and kind of think PopDoc is really that connection to help you to get access to your data wherever you're at. All right, I said we talk about 3 different scenarios. I want to get into that right now because there's some fun things in here I think to talk about. So let's acknowledge this, right? Microsoft, if you are moving to Business Central, Microsoft has a tool called Cloud Migration Tool. As part of it, it will do some of those things I talked about. It'll help you move some master records and again, maybe some open documents and beginning balances and things like that. It will also, there is an option that I'm not sure a lot of people have done, but there is an option to move some of that data into a data lake as well, and then give you some tools, whether it be Power BI or something like that, to pull that data. So let's talk about a few key points. Again, this is only available from Microsoft. So again, if you're switching to NetSuite or Acumatica or Intacct or whatever it may be, this tool doesn't do anything for you. It basically moves all of your tables to an Azure data lake, and so it's basically copying directly. And so it has, I don't know if any of you have looked at the GP table names, but they're not beautiful. They can be kind of cryptic sometimes if you're trying to find the originating transaction amount. It might be ORG, TRX, AMT or something like that. So some of those things are just not necessarily intuitive to a lot of humans, and I guess that's part of what it does. It moves those that way. It also doesn't move the third-party data. So this is kind of a critical one, because I think for a lot of our GP customers, there's a ton of them that have third-party products, even beyond like SmartList Builder and Extender and FlexCoder and those kinds of things. I think there's so many other products that are out there that you would want to have that data archived, and Microsoft has basically just ignored everything that's not part of their standard solution. I talked about it just briefly too, that it has the SQL names for the tables and columns, which again can be kind of hard to find that data later on. And then another option here is that you might be moving a ton of data that you don't really care about, right? I think for many of us, there's probably 3 or 5 lists that we really care about, right? If you focus on purchasing side of things, maybe it's some lists around purchase orders or the purchase order lines, or maybe even some payables stuff, and maybe a few financial transactions. Or if it's on the sales side, it might be the sales line history and those kinds of things. So you may only need five lists of that history, but this is a tool that will move everything. Okay, I want to talk about a different approach. This is built into PopDoc. So again, the beautiful part about this is when you have PopDoc, you don't pay any extra for this. This is a powerful tool that's in there. And what am I talking about when we say the hybrid approach from PopDoc? Well, this allows us to move our smart lists and our favorites to the Azure data lake. So that's what we're going to talk about in this first scenario, is that we have the capability of doing that. So let's talk about what are a few key points here. Again, we're utilizing PopDoc to move that data from your your lists. Okay, I'll just say that today. The second point here you can see is that we can move your smart lists and your favorites, and now those names that you're used to, right, that you see inside of smart list inside of GP. When it says customer number, you're gonna see that. You're not gonna see what it actually is in the SQL database, which is like CUSTNMBR. So we're gonna give you those human readable names. You're not stuck. You're not stuck with just, I think this is really important. You're not stuck with just the standard smart lists that we have. Again, we have probably almost 100 of them right now out of the box, but you also can take anything you built with Smart List Builder. And so, and even, I guess I'll show you this in a second, but even if you built, if you've chosen to do the baby Smart List Builder Designer, I think it's called Designer from Microsoft, we actually will be able to take those lists as well. So I think that's really powerful that we can basically pull all those smart lists. And again, now we aren't just stuck in the Microsoft world. We can move these lists for viewing in other systems. So it doesn't have to be Business Central. It could be, like I said, NetSuite, Acumatic, Intact. Wherever you're looking at going, we can take this historical information and we can embed it in these other systems. And a key thing is you can choose only the fields you want to archive if you want. You can like have a favorite. So you could say, hey, you know what? I have 20 years of GP data, but I really only want to move the last 10. Or maybe you have a requirement that, right, there's 7, you have to keep 7 years or 3 years, or I talked to somebody the other day, had 15-year requirement is what they had to do for regulatory purposes. So whatever it is, you can get down to those options and say, hey, this is all the information I want to show out there. And again, you don't have to move all your data from 20 or 30 years. And then a key part, right, is that we can access all the third-party data, right? So as long as you have a smart list or a table or a view, we can pull all that information. And then a really key point to this is, as well, is being able to archive your entire company database. I kind of think of it as that insurance policy, right? Is that we have a button that says, hey, you know what, I'm ready. Let's move it all up there. And then now I can actually turn off my SQL server, and I don't have to maintain that if I don't want to. So to me, this is really powerful. And let me give you a real example. We have a customer that had 70 different databases, right? So they had 70 GP companies, and that was working for them. But now when they were looking at moving, they determined that some of those maybe were no longer active and they didn't really want to maintain them anymore. So they ended up only moving 50 of the databases. So that's the beautiful part, is that you can say, hey, I don't want to move all of them. I can just choose the ones that need to be archived and, again, accessible from other systems. All right. So I think one of the things we'll obviously talk about is we have an incredible migration. If you are looking at going from GP to BC, we have a fantastic solution there. I will show you some stuff around it there in just a few moments. But again, it's not just for BC. We have, I'm going to show you a few options. So I think I just have, in the demo today, I just have NetSuite on there, but I think you'll see that wherever you are choosing to move, if you're moving your GP data, we got a solution for you. Another key part, we talked about it briefly, but that gateway. So making sure that we do have secure access from PopDoc, again, which is in the cloud, allowing us to access your on-prem data if you need to in a secure manner. All right, I think it's time for a demo now. We've done a lot of slides. I'm not normally a slide guy. Okay, so here I'm in PopDoc, but I'm going to jump out of PopDoc for a second, because I think there's a lot of really powerful things when we look at putting it in other systems. So let's start with Business Central. And what I want to show you is, you can see PopDoc is embedded inside of here. You may get some feeling that, boy, this kind of has a smart list type feel. That's exactly what we've done. We want to make sure that you have that same experience inside of Business Central, that you basically get your smart lists right inside of here. And so again, whether this happens to be Business Central data that we're looking at, and you can see I can quickly switch between lists, so kind of like smart lists inside of GP. One really cool thing, if I wanted to pull data from more than one company, so I have two different companies inside of this Business Central, now you can see it adds another column that tells me which company it's coming from. So these first ones are coming from Kronos US. These ones are coming from the EU company that we have set up, which is pretty cool. I'm going to go back to just one just to keep it a little simpler. Now, you have some of those same kinds of things where if you want to add a couple of columns, you can see it takes a couple clicks, and there we go. We now have our new those 4 new fields I just added. That pops up immediately. So that's pretty cool. Some other things you'll notice, right, again, are even better than your smart lists inside of GP, is that you get some subtotaling inside of here. So if we all of a sudden wanted to say, hey, well, can I see this by customer? Well, look at this. Now I'm getting by customer, I am getting the subtotals. So if we wanted to drill into Adam Park, we can see here all those invoices for Adam Park that came over, and I have a subtotal by customer and then an overall subtotal. We can even drill down, we can see the individual lines that might be on a particular invoice, for example. So if I clicked on this, this is actually going to, I might have that one configured correctly. Sorry about that. I may just not have that one hooked up right. So anyway, we can actually see a detail section down below or on the side, or we can even drill down like you could with Smart List Builder, where you could drill down to another smart list. Same kind of thing, is that we can, without having to go back to that window even, we can drill into it and see the details. Now, again, if you want to switch lists, you could quickly switch to like a purchasing list instead. If we wanted to see some payment journals, now it's going to pull up that information and show us the payment journals that are coming from Business Central. But what I wanted to focus on is, okay, that's great. That's the new stuff, but you promised that I could see the historical GP data and other systems. So that's what I want to show you next. You'll see I have a couple of scenarios here that we're going to talk about, and so we'll come back here probably a few times. What I want to show you in this one, though, particularly, if I look at the sales transactions here, you can see that in this list, it's pulling some information on my, looks like top 100 sales transactions for, well, after 2025. Okay. And so this is now pulling from a data lake. This is not Business Central data anymore. This is GP data that has been pushed into that data lake and allowing me to access it. Again, I have the same kind of stuff. If I want to add, some aging periods, I can do that and have those fields basically added to that list inside of there and see that. Skippy's getting his exercise. There we go. Okay, so just want to show you that we can access that type of information. Now, I want to show you a scenario here that's really, really powerful, because I can do something where I'm pulling data from the data lake, right? That we had done some processes, and I'm gonna give you a little behind the scenes. I'm gonna show you how we do that. But in this case here, I'm pulling records from not only the data lake, I'm also pulling it from the new system that I'm in. And so if we look at this, we can see these first ones are coming from Business Central. If I go a few hundred in and scroll to the bottom, you can see that changes. They're no longer coming from Business Central. These are ones that were archived from GP and moved to my data lake. And so now I have something really powerful, because I don't have to go 2 different places to find that information. I have it right inside of, in this case, Business Central. I have a view of all of my transactions, whether they're historical, ones that did not get brought into the system, or whether the new ones that are in the system. And to me, that's where the power starts coming in. So let's talk about how you might also use this. If I pull up our good old buddy Aaron Fitz, right? So this is obviously a customer that's been migrated from my GP system, so it's been brought over. But this is probably where you might want to see the related information. And again, this could be, I'm showing you a customer right now, but this could be a vendor or an inventory item or whatever the type of record is, we can display that information. So what I want to show you is this part that's embedded inside of here. This is PopDoc, right? It's giving me a live look into not only my historical, so we can see, right, these first records for Aaron Fitz, these are all coming from GP. I can tell if you guys are familiar with that. These are the items in Fabricam. But if I go into the next page for this, we can start seeing at the end of this, these are new invoices that have been entered inside of Business Central for Aaron Fitz. And so you can see this gives me that full view of the customer without ever having to leave. I now have access to see all of that type of information. Okay, I think what I'd like to do next is I want to show you really how easy it is to go in and move something to a data lake. And so if we go inside of here, and this is the PopDoc Web Interface. This is where you'll do a lot of configuration for lists. This is kind of the home page or dashboard, a lot of people call it. So you can display information. I don't talk about it a lot, but we do give you some, about 10 different chart types. So if you want to see a pie chart, or if you want to see more of a totaling, number kind of thing like this, or summarizing, we can display whatever data you need to do your job, whether it's coming from 5, 10, 15 systems. PopDoc can bring all of that data together. So let's just talk about it really briefly here. You can see I have the same kinds of lists that I had inside of Business Central. This one happens to be going, direct to my GP system, and so I'm pulling payables transactions. But we have the exact same interface, right, where we can add columns, where we can, add filters. And I didn't talk about this before, but we can have an unlimited amount of filters, right? So gone are the days of just having 4 inside of GP. You have an unlimited amount. Now, some of my favorite ones are, again, if we look at like document date, instead of choosing one of these options and choosing between this and that and or greater than a certain date, these are some of my favorite ways of doing this. Is I can say, you know what, give me this month or last month or this week, last week, this quarter, this year, last year. Those to me are really powerful types of filters, because I can now save this as a favorite and quickly go back to it. And the power of that, I think, is you can have as many favorites as you want. You can share them with your team members, and so again, this is where you would do that. So you can see, doesn't look like I have any right here, but if I had a teams I could share it with, or other users, you'll see that as well. And so these favorites for me are just a fantastic way of accessing the data. And again, you have that same thing. If you want to see it from multiple companies, you can do that, and it'll tell you from GP which ones are coming from Fabricam and which ones are coming from other places. Okay, so just showing you that we can access that data, but now you say, okay, that's great. How do you have the tools that will help me in this quest of moving from my GP system and moving it to the data lake for access in other systems? Or again, even there's other ways we haven't talked about, but I'm going to specifically talk about a data lake right now. And so if I go ahead and look at this data lake, you can see I have a couple of lists that are in here already, but I'm going to show you how easy it is to add a new list. We basically say, okay, you know what? I want to point to that GP connector that I have. I'm going to do it for a specific company or list. Let's I don't know, let's do inventory items instead. We haven't done purchasing and sales stuff. So if I wanted to do my just my items, we'll keep it simple. Now, if I had a favorite, like I said, if you had a restriction for transactions where it was only the past 5 years or 10 years or 7 years, whatever it may be, you can put those kinds of restrictions in. Now, this is actually again, a lot of people, I want to demystify some of these things. People get scared when they hear data lake and Azure and fun stuff like that. At the end of the day, really all we're doing is taking the data that you've given us from that smart list or the table or whatever, and we are basically putting a file up there. So if I go ahead, and I hope I don't have one called demo items. And we're gonna put that in the GP group that I have. Now we have some really cool options in here. We built some things that, again, if you have millions and millions of records, we don't want to necessarily bite that off all in one chunk, and so we have a chunking strategy that allows us to say, hey, let's only grab smaller pieces so that we can grab it and not, you know, overrun your SQL server with a huge query that takes 10 minutes to run and slows everything down. So we are making sure that we can bite off smaller chunks and send that. And we have default ways that are pretty great, but we also have a way of, you know, a custom strategy. So this is, again, something you may never need to get into, but this is awesome that it's there to help us in those cases where you have millions upon millions of records. So let's go ahead and we're going to run this right now. And what it's started to do is basically go and grab the data from GP. So again, we had inventory items. It's grabbing that data from GP. It is then taking it and moving it to an Azure data lake. And so now that we can access it wherever we need to. So if we go and look at the status of this, this is pretty cool that we can actually see when it started. And looks like this one literally took 6 seconds. How about that? That's pretty quick, that we were able to move all those items. Now again, if you have a company with 5 gigabytes of data and stuff like that, it's going to take a little bit longer than just the sample data in here. But this is pretty cool. So now we have a new list that is been moved from the GP system to the data lake. So let me show you what that looks like inside of here. If I now pull my data lake, and we put it in that GP and we called it demo items. It is now pulling this data from the data lake. It's not hooked into GP at all, right? You know, we don't see companies anymore up here like we did before, where we could choose between companies. We do have access to, again, all of the beautiful names that are from the inventory item. And so if we wanted to add, you know, some of these options, we could add those fields even though it's coming from the data lake. And now the beautiful part, right, is that we can, with a click of a button, we can add it to Business Central or some other systems that we would have it inside of. So that to me is really, really powerful. Okay, I want to go into, we spent a ton of time on Business Central, but what I want to show you is another scenario, because I know not everybody is necessarily staying inside of the Microsoft family of products. They're maybe taking this opportunity to say, if I am going to move, I'm you know, evaluating what's out there. So what I'll show you is that we have PopDoc inside of NetSuite in this case, or like I said, we can put it inside of Acumatica, or we can put it inside of Intact, right? Those are all places that we can do it. Now, what we do is when we embed it in these other systems, we make it look and feel like the system that it's in. So all of a sudden, this looks a little different than what I was showing you earlier. This is PopDoc embedded inside of here, but it now has the feel, the look and feel of the NetSuite system that we're in. So you can see this is just some standard lists around NetSuite, or I could be pulling in, you know, Salesforce information or whatever. PopDoc can handle that. But let's talk about the migration scenario, right? Being able to access your historical data wherever you work. So whether it's, you know, some of these other lists around purchasing or sales, or again, I have a similar list that I showed you before inside of Business Central. This is now very different because this is pulling from NetSuite data. And so let's go ahead, let's grab all of them. We'll just take, I think I have less than 10,000, so we'll find out. So it's now going to go take my custom list, right, that we've done in PopDoc, where we pulled the historical information from GP that's sitting in a data lake, and then also the new information that's inside of NetSuite. Let's take our buddy Aaron Fitz that I've moved over here. So if we look at Aaron Fitz, here, we get it down to Aaron Fitz records. You can now see that in PopDoc, right, we're pulling 2 records from, in this case, the NetSuite system. And the rest of these are the ones that are sitting in Azure Data Lake that came from my GP system. So this is powerful to me, again, because now I have an overall look at the data that I need in this system, and I don't have to go to multiple places. It's gonna be there for me. Again, some of the same kinds of things. This is probably important to show you is that we can embed it in other places inside of here. And so if we go take our buddy Aaron Fitz again, and if now we have the customer record open inside of here, you can see that we can embed all kinds of data inside of here. So I have a PopDoc one. I have one. This is a little different. It's Zendesk tickets instead of like historical GP data. But we could have put in, that what I showed you before could have been that historical data for just this one customer right inside of here. So you can get an idea that PopDoc allows you to bring that data to wherever you're going. All right, let's go back to another scenario. And that scenario is you may, there's a certain set of people that say, you know what, I don't, the data lake's cool, but I don't necessarily need to put all my stuff out there. I can keep my SQL Server running for the next 5 years or 10 years or whatever. And I just need to be able to access that data wherever I'm going, right? Like BC or NetSuite or Acumatica or some other system. So I still want to access that data, but I want to use PopDoc to bring it to those other systems. And the key to this is really it doesn't matter if you're using GP on premise, right? So maybe you have the SQL Server today that's sitting on premise, or we've had a number of customers that have actually moved their SQL Server to the cloud. Like it might be in Azure, whether it be Azure SQL or on a virtual machine inside of there, so that they don't have to maintain something locally. Either of those options is going to be just fine and allow us to access that information directly. So let's talk about it. Again, I'll skip the first part here, but you don't necessarily need the data lake, right? We can do a direct access to that server, either through a gateway, or there's some ways that you can open up ports if your IT person wants to do that. You get full access to all your smart lists and favorites. That's the great part is right, you could continue to create new smart lists, and PopDoc will be able to pull those in, and you have access to all your third-party data. So let's talk about some of those things, because to me that's a really important thing as well. So if we go ahead and look at our GP connector that I have inside of here, and you'll see I have a ton of connectors. Okay, maybe just one little side. You're not limited to just GP and BC and stuff that we talked about. You can see we have a ton of connectors inside of here. Here's a number of the ones we're talking about in the Microsoft world. So Business Central, right? GP, could be Nav, SL, those kinds of things. But you'll see that there's a ton of dedicated connectors, and even we can connect to other SQL servers. We can connect to other web services. So we have a lot of ways of connecting to whatever data you need. But let's look at our existing GP connector here. So if I look at this connector, you can see these groups. Boy, you might recognize these, right? These are basically how your smart lists are laid out today. And you can add as many as you want, right? If you had some additional stuff around, I don't know, call it job costing or something like that, or you had a third party and you wanted to do new groups, you can do that. And you can rename these as well if you like. Like I said, there's about 100 of these standard ones that are in there for you. So those just come out of the box. But this is the thing I love about it. This is what E1 always does, is we try to bring those things that only developers could do in the past. We try to bring these things to the end user or the consultant that can make sure that you don't necessarily have to bring in an IT person every time to get the data you need. So what do I mean by that? Well, we can add new lists. What this is doing, this is going and finding lists that I maybe haven't added. So you'll see there might be some payroll ones. We kind of hide those. We don't allow access to those right away. You have to explicitly grant access. It could be, you know, something that you've built with Smart List Builder, right? So you can see I have a couple of Smart List Builder lists that I haven't moved over yet, or even, like I said, baby Smart List Builder, the designer. If you built something inside of there, you can pull that information in as well. Now you're still not limited to just smart lists and you know, other lists that we have in here, because you can actually pull in, like I said earlier, we can pull in any table. So whether it's coming from one of the company databases or the Dynamics database, we can pull any table or view and have access to that information right inside of this connector. So that to me is really, really powerful. We can also, as you can see here, I have one simple list, it looks like, but we have the capability, and this is where things kind of get a little fuzzy for some people. What I want you to understand is, especially nowadays, is with PopDoc, you basically, you get the Smart List Builder application with it. And so it's a great combination. So for some people, the best way of creating smart lists is through Smart List Builder. That's awesome, right inside of GP. But there are still some things that may be easier and can allow you to do more complex things, because we can now do not only like a join list. That's typically what you might do inside of GP, right? You maybe join the sales lines with the sales header, and then maybe customer information and maybe some extender information, right? You're joining these other tables. Well, we can do that with a join list inside of PopDoc. We can also do it, like I said, it doesn't have to be just GP data. So I could join GP data, which is sitting in a SQL database, but I could join that with a Business Central. I could join it with another API. I can join it with an Azure Data Lake that's pulling from a file. I could join those 4 different pieces of information as long as I have something that connects them. We can do merges. So if you kind of think of it in the SQL world, that'd be like a union. So I could take historical information from one table, or again, it doesn't even need to be a GP table anymore. My example of a merge list is I was pulling live information from Business Central or live information from NetSuite and combining it with historical information that we had put into the data lake for GP. So you can see that there's a lot of power that you have all those things to build that in. And I won't go into the other ones inside of here. But just to show you that again, you can do that direct connection and pull what you need to inside of here. So let's talk about that a little bit. How does that look inside of, like, again, if you went back to Business Central, what does that look like? And I won't do that one. What I'll show you though is this, instead of, and you can see these options I was showing you are ones that have been pushed to the data lake. This one is connected directly to the SQL server that we have. Again, whether it's an Azure or a virtual machine or whatever it is, but we can allow access, PopDoc can have access to it. And again, now if I wanted to see payables transactions from GP, and again, now we're getting GP companies as opposed to Business Central companies. And so this is a direct connection to that SQL database to pull that information. So just showing you, you have options. I think that's kind of a key part to this whole thing, is that we're not forcing you to be one particular way. We're saying whichever way you'd like to go, we're going to give you access to the data and allow you to embed it wherever it needs to be. All right, let's talk just briefly about Smart Connect, because I think a lot of people are like, okay, in my overall migration scenario, what what do I use, maybe Microsoft tools for, or other tools and other systems to do that migration, versus what can Smart Connect handle, what can PopDoc handle? And so I think one of the things that's real key about this is that there's a time where you may need to do some of these things. So let's just talk about a couple things. Smart Connect, again, if you do not know, it's really a tool for moving data. What we're showing with PopDoc a lot of times is we're showing the data giving you that visibility into it without necessarily moving it and transforming it into that system and duplicating the data in another system. We're basically just giving you a way of viewing it. So Smart Connect's a little different, right? Smart Connect will take the data wherever it may be and will push it in there. And so this is a great opportunity. Again, if you found that the tools were lacking, if you had a bunch of custom fields or other scenarios that weren't being met by some of the standard tools, that you do have Smart Connect at your disposal to be able to handle all of those scenarios and do your migrations. Again, for more of the standard information, whether it be the master records, right, like customers, vendors, items, those kinds of things, or whether it is some of the transactions that might need to come in. And again, I think the key thing, right, on a lot of this stuff is that you can handle custom fields, extender, all those kinds of things. You get error handling, and there's a lot of great things that Smart Connect does provide for you. Okay, I'm going to start answering questions. There's a few in there. Again, I encourage you to keep asking them, and we'll just keep cranking away at them. All right, the first one I have is what versions of GP can you do this, historical data for? Really, we can probably go back as far as GP10 with just some of our out-of-the-box stuff. Prior to that, we could still access it. It just might, it might be a few more views and things like that we might have to get through to access that data. But the key point is that we can get that historical information out. We could take the entire GP database and move it to the data lake so that you could access it wherever it needs to go. So good question. Basically, GP10 on up is really easy. Something other than that, let us know. Okay, got another question here saying we have extender in GP. Can it be migrated to Business Central and PopDoc? Yeah, absolutely. All of the extender information, right? If you have it in a smart list, right? So a lot of you will already have it attached to a smart list. You can pull in that information just by default using those smart lists. If it's other things that maybe haven't been brought in, the whole database migration will do it. We'll move it to the data lake, but again, some of the easiest ways are just moving a view or a table and bringing that in. So yep, you can handle all of that. Got another question. Does E1 have any data schematics to assist in migrating from GP to BC? I'm not entirely certain what that means. Again, a lot of the stuff that we're doing is we're basically taking your smart lists okay, let me say it's kind of two ways. Like I said, we have a couple of options. One, you can move the entire database, which is great. It's an awesome insurance policy. But like I said, a lot of people are really, you don't want direct access to the tables. You want kind of the smart list interface where you have the right names that you're used to inside a GP. And so we have those smart lists built already, and you can basically just choose which ones you want. And so you don't really need to understand the table structure underneath. Basically, PopDoc will do that when you move it to the data lake. Hopefully that answers it. If not, if you can ask again, and I'll be happy to clarify. Okay, question, does this work with Acumatica? Yeah, absolutely. Are you talking about, like, I'm not sure if you're talking about moving GP to Acumatica or if you're talking about, could I move Acumatica to Business Central? Either one would be fine. We have ways of getting at that data, and again, embedding it inside of either system. So again, whether it's seeing GP inside of Acumatica, we have that same kind of interface that we can put inside of there, so you can see all the historical type of transactions. Or again, if you wanted to see Acumatica data inside of Business Central instead of GP, you can do that. Okay, the $3,000 tier says to pay by December 31st. Okay, yeah, that was a promotion, I guess, that we had. We definitely have extended that because it's been very, very popular. So we probably should update that one in there, but we are extending that offer, so that's not a problem. Okay, can a complete historical transaction, I can't quite read it, archive. Yes, basically with, oh, okay, sorry, can we move a complete historical linked transaction as an archive? I'm not entirely certain what you mean by a linked transaction. Again, if we move the whole database as far as PopDoc goes, we basically have moved the table structure out there, and so we have every last table that's in that database that you pointed to. So again, we have people, like I said, had 70 different companies, but they only wanted 50, so they basically said, hey, we're not doing these 20, and then they hit the button and they moved all 50 of these databases and all of their tables in there. Now we have some options. I didn't show you this, but we do have options for if you want to minimize some of the size of that. There's a lot of tables that um, the way GP stores data, there's extra information in there, and so we can shrink it down a lot of times. Or even if there's a bunch of tables, right there's maybe companies where you're not using sales transactions at all. Maybe it's only on the purchasing side, and so it can actually eliminate all of those tables that you're not using. So there's a bunch of options in there for you in moving that. But yes, we can move all that history. Okay, someone said we'll be able to get the seminar emailed out to us. Yeah, at the end of this, you will, this is being recorded, and so you will get an email that will allow you to share the recording if you want to share it with other team members or whatever. You'll be able to get that. But yeah, after this is done and after it's finished the recording, you'll have that. Okay, and there we go. There was another question on the same thing. Can someone rewatch it? Absolutely. Okay, last call for questions. Thanks, those are some good ones. Well, if there isn't any more questions, thank you for your time today. And again, hopefully we can go with you on this journey wherever you do go. If it's just accessing your GP data today in the cloud with PopDoc, or if it is truly you're looking at options for accessing the historical information in another system, PopDoc can go on that journey with you. So thank you for your time, and we'll talk to you all soon. Thank you.